on the Players Tribune a couple of years ago, so you can always Google it and look at it. But it was while I was playing, I was out with some friends. I was with the New York Rangers when the Rangers were on that run in '94 for the Stanley Cup, and I just played in the Olympics. We'd won a silver medal. Everything was normal. Everything was going along quite fine. And then during the run with the New York Rangers, I was the third goalie. When I was out with some friends, some other Black Aces from another team from Washington, guys that weren't playing, guys that were sitting out. When I was out, I just describe it as something in my brain just kind of broke. And I was getting deep, dark, repetitive thoughts consistently over and over and over again that just, they didn't leave me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they were, the best way I can describe it is that, you're driving to your car down the street, and we've all had that impulsive thought, well, what if I just swerve my car into the other lane, right? I mean, we have a million thoughts a day. A normal person's brain would function. They would just go along. They go, oh, that was a stupid thought. And they'd go along with their day. Myself, my brain would latch onto that and ruminate over it, think, why do I want to hurt somebody? Why would I think that? And it would just torture me for 24 hours to the point where you would withdraw from society and just not drive your car again, right? I mean, it's...
Before you interrupt you, had you had these thoughts before, it all of a sudden just came?
Never. No, it was just, so as I get along in the story, so, that summer, I would go see a therapist, and I was suffering from debilitating panic attacks. I could barely get out of bed, anxiety, depression, all that stuff that comes with it. I would make an attempt at my own life at one point. Thankfully, obviously, unsuccessfully, I'm still here. But I decided at that point I would just kind of hide my mental illness because I didn't know what it was, and I didn't want to go see anybody. I didn't want anybody in the NHL to know, right? I was a young guy who was trying to make the NHL. So fast forward 3 years later, eventually, it got so bad that I was in crisis mode that it was debilitating, that I couldn't get out of bed again, playing for Vancouver, that I finally reached out to a trainer. And we got back, and we were on a road trip, and then we got back to Vancouver, and a therapist came to my apartment and diagnosed me with obsessive compulsive disorder. When it was within probably about 20 minutes. And these are the Coles notes. I mean, there's 3 or 4 years worth of stories. But the point of the whole thing is that, I suffered with this, barely being able to get out of bed, barely being able to function, debilitating thoughts, panic attacks for 4 years. And all I had to do was go see somebody and go and get help and get diagnosed. And then from there, it's been a battle from there of getting the proper therapy and the proper system. So that's what I do now is I try to teach other people because we're men, we don't, we tend to just suffer in silence. We tend to just keep things to ourselves. And our suicide rates for men are off the charts right now between the ages of 35 and 50. 75% of suicides are male. And, I want to put a dent in that. I want to be able to teach men that it's okay to reach out, that there's a better life out there when you do.
So back I played in the 80s, you're in the 90s. I can imagine back in the days when we played, the courage it had to take for you to go and talk to your teammates about this or have them know that, because in those days, right, you don't want to show any sign of weakness. Oh, yeah. You're men, it's a national hockey. You got to fight your way through everything, whatever injuries, whatever. You don't show it. So that had to be something that was.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you didn't want your teammates to know. You didn't want the guys to know. You always,
years there suffering like this, and
yeah. So, and you're in a locker room, right? And, I walked in every day into the locker room feeling ashamed, like I was less of a man, that, and I was just trying to hang on to my NHL career. The prior year to getting diagnosed, I was on the NHL rookie team. So I was still holding it together. Like I was functioning, but I wasn't living. And it's an awful place to be. And then again, I got to a point where it was crisis mode, where that time I was actually going to end my life if I didn't reach out to a trainer. I was done. Like I was done. And then, so that's when I went and got help. And here I am. I live a great life. It was the best thing I ever did, was going and getting help.
Right. So was there something with this particular trainer you felt comfortable with, or why was it him?
It was because I had nowhere else to go. most people wait an average of 8 to 10 years before they actually reach out for help. They've made, some people have made 3 or 4 attempts at their own life. It's encouraging people to go and get early diagnosed. So once I get help and I get diagnosed, now I've been suffering for this long and I've been hiding it. And it's like cancer. Where would you rather get diagnosed, stage 1 or stage 4? Well, you want to get it at stage 1, right? Because at stage 4, it's a lot harder to treat. So the longer you wait, like I had to unravel 3-4 years of stuff that, that I sat with, that I suffered with, that I didn't go get help. If I could have gotten to get help the next day, it would have changed everything.
So explain that to me. 3 or 4 years of things. So just you have these thoughts and they go away. It just builds and builds and builds.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I have what's called PURO. So it's obsessive compulsive disorder. So most people think of OCD people as people that wash their hands or they're organized or they're really neat, right? I do everything in my head. You can't see it. So everything is done in my head. And it's, the 3 categories of pure obsessions are sexual intrusive, harm thoughts, and religious thoughts. So everyone's heard of the mother that, she has a new baby and then she has a harm thought, like, what if I hurt my baby? Because and then all of a sudden these people, what happens is that they ruminate on it. It's almost like something gets stuck in your brain, like a broken record. And you can't, it's just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, getting a thought, trying to figure it out, dispel it, and people with obsessive compulsive disorder are typically overly kind. And that's the problem. So when they have a bad thought, they're wondering why, they're trying to figure it out. Like they don't want to hurt people. They don't want to do anything. And then it manifests into what like I said, obsessive compulsive disorder, where it's 24 hours a day. And you just start to avoid life. You start to withdraw. You start to, do everything you can to stay away from that situation. But it's highly treatable. So that's where I encourage people to go and get help.
So when you finally got help, is it immediate? Or it's a whole.
Well, no, it's not immediate. I wish it was. I did a therapy called ERP, exposure response. Most people know CBT. ERP is like CBT on steroids, and it brought me right to my knees. Like it brought me right back to where I was. But then I climbed out of it. And what it was is I finally found a therapist that could treat me. I went to probably 6 different therapists. It's one thing to get diagnosed. It's another thing to be able to find someone that can actually help you out there. And so I finally found a therapist that knew what they were doing with obsessive compulsive disorder. And I haven't looked back since. I mean, that was 10 years ago, and I do well. Like I'm great. Like I deal with stuff, but now it's the thoughts used to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now it's like 3 minutes, and I can just dismiss it as a thought.
Right. So obviously the whole world knows, the hockey world knows. What's the response been from the hockey world when you deal with people?
It's been incredible because I think we all suffer with a little bit of something. And at some point all of us suffer with some form of anxiety and depression at some point in our life. When it crosses the line into mental illness, that's a whole different story. But the numbers are 20%, 1 in 5. So 1 in 5 people will have will have a diagnosable mental illness. The rest of us, sometimes, if someone passes away, you're sad, you can get depressed for a while. Or you're anxious about a situation. Those are all things that can be treated, that are all very but you can go see somebody and get help for. But when we look at 1 in 5, there's 700 NHL players, right? In over something like that. So there's 20 on a team. There's at least 4 or 5 guys on each team statistically that are diagnosable, and it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer, a doctor, a garbage man, a construction worker, or a professional athlete. None of us are immune to mental illness.
And it's interesting too. Back, especially when I played in the 80s and you in the 90s, fighting was a bigger part of the game. And I always felt like a lot of these guys that fought all the time, they really loved it. They wanted to fight. When you meet these guys in the game now, it's interesting when they talk about it, like they hated fighting. Most of them. There was a few guys that really enjoyed it, but most guys will talk about, I hated to do it. I want to play in the NHL, but I had to do it. And I think it's the same thing. That's like we have this perception as men, and I think like it's the real world too, not just hockey, but I'm related to hockey now, where we have to act a certain way.
Yeah.
Right? We have to be this certain toughness. We can't have a weakness. And then when you get older and go through the stuff that you've been through, and you learn things, you realize, well, it was stupid. I mean, a real man is somebody that talks about loving his family and those kinds of things. We didn't talk like that when we played, right? It's like give somebody a hug or something like that. It was like, no way, we don't do that. But to me, don't you think that it's like when you face and you just realize, no, I love somebody. I'm going to hug them. I'm going to hold them, whatever.
Yeah.
The problems. That's what really a real man is, right?
Yeah, and a real man is going and getting help. A real man suffering in silence is ridiculous. And I even say this with the attempt that I made on my own life, and this is part is like, do you think anybody would have come to my funeral and said, hey, what a man, he sucked it up. Yeah, that's awesome, great, he sucked it up. No, they would have said, why didn't he talk to somebody? Why didn't he reach out? He could have talked to me. Everybody, we all feel the same way, right? So suffering in silence is not being a man. Getting help, talking to your friends, getting different ideas how to deal with stuff. That's being a man. And so that you're a better person for you and for your family and everybody around you. Yeah.
So we had that summer, I don't know, when we lost Ripon and those guys. What was that, like maybe 10 years ago? Yeah. So we lost 3 hockey players during the summer. And I mean, there's different things going on with all 3. Do you think that woke anybody up around the league to the issue?
I think everybody's aware of it. It's once you start talking about suicide, it's such a taboo subject and such a taboo word that nobody wants to touch it, right? It's like, and it kind of just gets swept under the carpet. And it's not right. I mean, we need to talk about this stuff. Our suicide rates for 10 to 24-year-olds since 2005 are up 56%. I mean, that's a huge problem.
What's going on?
You know what? There's a lot of different. I think society. I think we've put a lot of pressure on our kids. We put a pressure on them to get good grades and to go to the right school and to do this and be that. And I think social media is a big part of it. The online stuff is a big part of it. But I'm not qualified to sit here and tell anybody what it is and what it isn't. I just know that the numbers are what they are. And we need to do something about this. Like, our kids need us. And that's why I go to speak to youth. And the thing that bothers me the most about what happened with me is that why was this information withheld from me when I was in high school, the mental health stuff? And why are we not giving it to our kids today?
Right.
They need the information. So that night that I was out, if I had that thought and I was like, oh, I learned about this in school. This is that OCD stuff. I need to go see somebody. I go see a doctor. If I could have gotten help the next day, I would have had a longer career. I wouldn't have had to suffer. I wouldn't have made an attempt on my own life. And it was such simple information to give our kids. And why was that withheld from me?
So today there's nothing like that in school. So the sex education.
Better. Yeah. It's better, but it's still not. There's still a lot of stuff that we need to tell our kids what anxiety is, what depression is, what OCD is, but like, they need to learn this stuff and know this stuff, right? I mean, we're talking, so if the classroom has 30 kids, there's going to be 4 or 5 with a diagnosable mental illness at some point in their life. And we know that typically the number between the ages of 10 and 24 is when a mental illness is going to happen. Right. And for us to withhold that information from our kids is a travesty. It's disgusting that we'll teach them all about sex ed and all that stuff, but we have these kids taking their own lives and we're not giving them the information because, for whatever reason, because it's triggering or something, not giving them the information is triggering.
Right. So that would be the fear. Some people think, well, if you talk about it, it's going to be, say, well, I've got some mental illness. Is that?
Yeah, it's the dumbest thing. It's like, it's to me, we need to start talking about suicide. We need to start letting our kids know that we've all had, thoughts where of this, and that it's okay to have these thoughts, but that's not the answer. The answer is to go and get help. The answer is to talk to somebody. That help is available, that you can get better. But a lot of these kids that I come up to when I talk at schools, it's the parents. The parents don't believe them. They're like, my mom and dad don't believe me. I'm struggling every day. I can barely get out of bed. I can barely function. And these kids are in tears talking to me. And it's the parents that don't want little Johnny or little Sally to have any issues. So they just kind of ignore it, and they just kind of sweep it under the rug. These kids need help. Like, they need our help.
And so can we pinpoint a reason why it happens? It's just something that they're predisposed to it? Or?
Mental illness is such a, it's such a mystery out there because our brains are so complex, right?
Right.
And the stigma that's attached to it. So it's, if you broke your arm, you would go to the doctor the next day, and you would go see a doctor and you would get help, and nobody would judge you for it. But all of a sudden, if something is in your brain is not functioning properly, well, all of a sudden we judge people for them. We call them crazy. We call them names. Go take your happy pill. Blah blah blah. Right. So if you had a broken arm, you wouldn't say that to somebody.
Sure.
Our brains are such a mystery that they're the most complex thing we have, but yet we expect people's brains to function perfectly. Like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They break too. Your brain breaks too. So I see on your screen there, you have a question of what can we do to help? Well, I mean, the biggest thing is to encourage people to get help, be a safe place for people to talk to, listen without judgment, and just encourage people to be available. And it can also be as much as talking to your family, talking to your kids, right? Like, let mental illness be something in your house that is talkable and that's okay to talk about.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because I know my sons are grown now; they're 26 and 29, and I always made sure when they were younger to, for instance, have a discussion with them about alcohol.
Yeah.
To not make it such a big deal. Like, say, okay, listen, I'm not condoning that you drink alcohol at any time, especially when you're a minor. But let's face realities; it happens out there. So it's almost like, okay, if you make it this big deal, like a taboo thing not to do, your kids are going to want to do it even more. So it's the same thing with this. Make it so that it's part of your daily discussion. You're sitting around the kitchen table and discussing it, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? Like I said, no one's immune to it, and our kids need us, right? Like I would never want to, for my own child to take their own life, and I didn't know, right? And I didn't know what was going on, or something like that. And that's pretty extreme. But if they're suffering, we want them to live the best life they can and be healthy and help them. And they need our help. And especially in today's, with how fast paced the world is, I'm not sure our brains were meant to function as, with all this social media and how fast paced everything is and how instantaneous it is. And yeah, our kids need our help. Right. I mean, and for me, and I say this is that for every suicide that's out there, we failed that child as a society. We really have, by not giving them the information, by not giving them safe places to reach out to, as a society. And we need to change that.
And Corey, do you think, from suffering through it yourself, that you can, if you're in the presence of people on a daily basis, you can start to figure out, even if that person doesn't come out and tell you, who's having some problems?
Yeah, you know what? This is what I always say. Okay, so it's about starting a conversation. So there's some signs and symptoms of people, right? If your friends, they start to withdraw from you, there's something going on. Someone that's normally social, you have an A student that all of a sudden turns into a D student or an F that's barely functioning. Something's going on. Things like that. Somebody that's sleeping a lot. Something's up. So having a conversation is asking them, hey, I noticed some changes, blah, 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 whatever. Do you want to go for a coffee? Do you want to talk? A lot of people right away will be like, no, I'm good. Thanks. I'm good. But if you let them know that you're a non-judgmental, safe person to talk to, it might be 6 months. It might be 2 weeks. It might be 3 months. Eventually that person's going to come and talk to you.
Right. So teachers, the coaches, the bosses at work, those kind of people are co-workers. Just being aware of changes that somebody's having. Yeah.
Be aware of changes, and then just let them, and it's not to embarrass them. Just, it's having an open door policy. It's just, it's like, hey, you let people know that you're a safe place to talk to, that that you're there to help them if they need it. And then basically, if they need the help, leading them in the right direction. I'm not qualified to treat anybody, obviously, a former hockey player with a Western Hockey League education graduation package.
Yeah.
But I can lead people in the right direction, and I can listen, right? Sometimes people just need someone to know that you understand, and they can figure stuff out from there on their own.
So there's other issues too. Do you consider like CTE, the brain disorder or brain injury, is that still a mental health issue?
Yeah, I don't know if that, that I don't really know where that falls under the category. My issues I know aren't concussion related. And there isn't a direct link between OCD and concussions. So I go more in the mental health direction, but I do recognize that we have a severe issue out there with concussions and, repeated head trauma. That this stuff is happening, and we need to acknowledge it, and that these people need our help as well.
Right. And it's interesting too, coaching a lot, and I guess being in the agent business for so many years, like learning about concussions. I think a lot of people have the perception that it has to be a blow to the head to cause a concussion. And I think, as doctors will describe to you, it's like your brain is floating around inside your skull, right? And if it can be a hard hit, it doesn't have to be to the head where your brain now bangs against the skull, and that's what causes a concussion. So, like coaches out there, everybody that's dealing with anybody, particularly the youth, be aware that it just, you can't say he can get hit in the head so he doesn't have a concussion. He can still have a concussion, a brain damage.
Yeah. Well, and you and I had a mutual friend in Greg Johnson who, sadly took his own life this past summer, and I played with him, and you don't know what's lurking behind closed doors, right? You need someone. That's why I need people. That's why I need you and someone to talk to me, because I can see a broken arm, right? I can be like, dude, your arm's broken. You got a bone sticking out. You got to go to the doctor, right? But I can't see if your brain isn't functioning properly. So, we don't know what happened with Greg Johnson. We don't know if it's CTE or anything. But what I do know is that, we failed him as a society of letting him know that it was okay as a man to get help, right? And ultimately his decision was his decision. But in terms of reaching out and being a man, I feel somewhat, I wouldn't say responsible, but as a society, we didn't give him a safe place to reach out, right? He needed our help.
Definitely. So just so everybody's aware, Greg Johnson was a client of mine when I was in the agent business, and Corey played with him. And just he was a captain in Nashville when they first started the team down there, and just a fantastic guy, like just a great father, a great husband, like a real guy you're drawn to, like a fantastic person. So when we lost him, I think there's a lot of people like you. I was talking about other former players, myself included in that category. It's like, why didn't we know? But whereas in that kind of case too, it's as guys, I think especially, we are great friends. We would die for the person, but we kind of drift off and maybe not talk to the guy for 2 years. Doesn't mean we're not still great friends, but it's we'll go for a long period of time. And looking back at that situation, I think, and who knows, if maybe more people were around him and could see things, maybe it could have made a difference, but it was pretty sad. And now we're going through it. Now we have another former player, Mark Pavelich, who's so everybody aware of his story. It's been pretty public now. So Mark played for the 80 Olympic team that won the gold medal in Lake Placid, and he played here with the Rangers. I think I was with him for at least 3 or 4 years, and he's a great teammate, just loved by all his teammates, and a really good hockey player too. But so he's had some issues now, and now is incarcerated in the state of Minnesota, and dealing with his mental health issues as well. So it's tough.
Yeah. And you know what? And that's the stuff that I'm not, you and I, we're not doctors, we're not qualified to deal with. So we have to trust the professionals that they're doing what's best for Mark Pavelich. I'm concerned about him being incarcerated and all that, but we don't know the extent of it. We'd love to help him, and we'd love to reach out and help him. But I guess we just have to kind of wait and see. But it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that this stuff is happening, and there's nowhere for these guys to go. So I guess, we'll just wait and see how that unfolds.
So it seems like the big takeaway, whether it's in groups like ours in the hockey world, or people in general, family members, coworkers, neighbors, whatever it is, it's kind of being aware, right? I mean, if you've got people in your life and you see changes with them, things happening, be that person that is supportive and say, listen, I'm here to talk to you if you want to talk to them, right?
Yeah. And everyone's afraid to ask somebody. And I'm like, don't be afraid. It's not hard to go up to someone and say, hey, how you doing? You doing okay? I've noticed some changes. You want to go for coffee? Like, or I know you're going through a tough time. I know you're going through a divorce, or I know you're going through this or that. You want to go for coffee? Let's just hang out. Let's chat. And then it's not about solving their problems. It's about just listening to them.
Right.
And if it gets beyond something that you think is just something they can deal with, then it's leading them in the right direction to encourage them to go to a therapist, encourage them to go get help. Right. I have a therapist like a doctor. And I might not see my therapist for a year. I might not see my doctor for a year. But if I say something in my life comes up, maybe a job change or something, and I'm struggling with it, I know that person is there. It's like a doctor that I can go see, that I can call up, that I can go see. It doesn't always have to be a diagnosable mental illness to go see a therapist. We all think, you must be, to go see a therapist or something severe. No, it's life. It's getting tools to deal with life stuff, relationship stuff, things that I don't know. I want to have good relationships with my partner, with my girlfriend. And I didn't come equipped with all of those tools, right? We have to learn that stuff. So sometimes, relationship issues, I'll call up my therapist. I'll go see them. I'll talk for an hour, sort things through. And then, I'm better for the other person too.
Well, it's funny you say that story because, as you know, recently I was on that TV show Survivor.
Yeah.
And prior to the show, they do a whole lot of more psych tests and physical tests. And at the end of doing all the tests, you sit down with the doctor and they evaluate everything. So I sat down with this female doctor, really nice person. And she goes, Tom, you have a hard time with empathy. And I'm thinking to myself, seriously, I'm thinking like, do I even know what the word means? Like I'm thinking I have a broad description of what I think empathy means. I've tried to trick her into telling me what it meant. I said, so what's your definition of empathy? And she starts laughing at me. She goes, you don't even know what empathy means, do you? And I started thinking to myself, no, I have a hard time coming up with the real definition of empathy. So we went through all that. And it was just like you said, it was a really, it was a learning process for me about myself. And I felt like I was always very sympathetic to somebody else's needs, but I really wasn't that person that could just sit there and listen to their problems. And man, it's like now I've opened up the floodgates to being empathetic, and it's like
and you got to think of the generation you came from, right? It was suck it up. It was don't talk to anybody, don't tell anybody your problems. But how do you learn how to deal with your problems if you don't talk to somebody that has the tools that can help you, right?
I know. I had fantastic parents. They did so much for me.
Yeah.
The tough old farm boy. We had a farm, and it was like if something was going on. My mother had some mental health issues, and I watched have her situation, but it was never discussed what was happening. Like I never knew what was happening. So it's always kind of, in some strange way, it's kind of helped me more with my sons to make sure that I'm more open with them and discussing things. So it's not the right way to do things, but you can really see the stuff you're talking about where my parents just was like, no, we're not getting help. Like
Mine too. Yeah.
She just had a total breakdown before she there's no choice. So, well, listen, I know you've got to run. This has been great for everybody. We're going to have Corey on more often here, guys. He's a terrific advocate for the mental health issues around the country with men, women, hockey, Canada, US, wherever it is. So great to have you on board.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And like you say, I encourage people to please go get help. There's a better life out there. You don't have to suffer in silence, right? And being a man is getting help. Being a man isn't suffering in silence. And thanks for having me.
That way, that's what a real man is, right? A real man is not somebody that is just closed off. A real man makes sure that he can get help and he helps other people too.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom.
Great job.